right, what's up, everybody? It's your host, Wes Seiler for Conservatism on Tap, and we just got through with an amazing show with Refounding Fathers. Had about 15, 16 folks on there live commenting like crazy. So, whole can of worms in that episode that we opened up talking about social media and Cuba and socialism and all kinds of fun stuff. But in this show, Conservatism on Tap, we get the chance to just kind of relax and unwind. I've got some wine here I'm going to enjoy and get to talk amongst Burkean conservatives. And one of my absolute favorite ones in the entire world, Josh Lewis from Saving Elephants Podcast. It's great to have you back, buddy. You've been a regular on this show for a while now, and I know you've got so many things going on in your life, your own podcast and everything else. But we are always grateful to have you on the show. So it's good to see you, buddy.
Well, thank you. Good to be here, and very happy to hear I made your one of your most favorites lists. That's I feel quite honored.
Absolutely. I mean, just as a conservative, I respect everything that you do, and the perspective that you bring, and there's just so many things that we have to talk about and share, and it's awesome to be able to do that, especially as we've talked many times in an age where finding thoughtful intellectual conservatism is not always easy to do. And of course, one of the other ones that's always on this show is my brother John, and we were just talking about that before we started, giving him the night off so he's with his wife. Well deserved. He's been the person who's just going to help me put all this together from the very beginning a couple of years ago, and so I'm sure he's having a great time and enjoying just a night out on the town. He's from Richmond. He doesn't often talk about that, but he's from Richmond, Virginia. He's got an awesome nightlife there, and he loves to go out and enjoy it. But he's got 3 kids, and that tends to be few and far between, and I can certainly relate to with my 2. But it's going to be great to kind of focus with you, Josh. And we got a lot of stuff to talk about, and I really want to bounce it off, your perspective and kind of get your reaction to it, test some material and see what you think. And maybe you've got some contributions and, some thoughts that can help me work it out a little bit better. As part of our show, and we do this every time, we always go through the toast and roast. It's a tradition around here, is to be able to find something that's going on in the news that can relate to conservatism that we want to celebrate, and something that we've just got to draw attention to and roast as well. And so my toast tonight, Josh, is got to be the topic of our last show, which is what's going on in so many different countries based upon a reaction to far left-leaning governments. And that's clear right now in Cuba. And we just kind of introduced that topic. But, as the host of that show, I don't always get to give my own thoughts as much as I'd like. But you see what's going on here. And, I think it's amazing what folks are doing. And it's going to be very interesting to see what the future is for Cuba. And part of the reason, Josh, that it means so much to me is I live down here in Florida, as you know. And you see a lot of people who have come from left-leaning governments, and they are just ripe for conservatism, frankly, in any form, right? They just want to support something different. And, I think that's what you saw in this last election, is Republicans did very well. Trump did very well. But the entire state, really, aside from the presidential politics, you see that in DeSantis, our governor, who's wildly popular. You see that in Rubio. You see that in all these guys. The state's very red, and a big part of that is because you've got refugees, especially in the south part of the state, and there's a reason. And so, we may have our disagreements about, this politician versus that politician, but it's cool to me, and I want to celebrate the fact that freedom is not dead. There are people who are open to it. So what are your thoughts about that, though? Am I simplifying it too much, maybe? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know how you could. I just have so many thoughts on it. I mean, it's difficult not to simplify, right?
I know.
First of all, I think it's wonderful that Cubans are reaching for freedom like this. I mean,
right.
Good Lord, how long have they been imprisoned in this totalitarian dictatorship?
Right.
And Cuba and the United States used to have a much more culturally and the governments used to be much more friendly toward each other. Wouldn't that be wonderful if in our lifetime we got to see a return to that? I say that though with there's a tinge of wariness to my voice. My heart goes out to the Cuban people, but I mean, how many times have we seen this in Belarus and Hong Kong and Venezuela? The good guys don't always win. The people flying their flag right alongside the United States flag, they don't always prevail. And also speaking as you and I being Burkean conservatives,
right.
sometimes, as you see, like, for example, in the Arab Spring,
Yeah.
there were a lot of really good actors there who yearned for freedom, who had a understanding of that, but unfortunately, they were kind of in the minority.
Mm.
And when the dictatorships were toppled, what sometimes would replace them either was worse or it devolved into a civil war. And so
Oh,
none of that is taken away from, I want liberty for the Cuban people,
yeah.
but I'm also a little wary because we've seen this before and it doesn't always go well.
Yeah, I think there was a guy who wrote a book on that about how to do revolution the correct way, right? Like, and the difference there. I've actually got multiple copies of of Reflections here, and of course, what I'm referring to is Burke talking about the French Revolution. There we go. There's a copy. You can actually see the title on. Burke was made famous, and people ask me all the time, like, "Why'd you name your channel after Burke?" Like, nobody knows who that is. Well, they should. They should know who he was because he made that all important distinction between liberty that is done with a set of ethics, right? Liberty that is done under the law, liberty that is done with a respect for tradition, and as well as a spirituality inherent with it, versus liberty that's done from a completely violent and bloodthirsty and lawless manner that tries to throw off not just a government but the laws of nature, right? The inherent natural law that we all live in, right? And what humanity is, which is humanity is fundamentally imperfect and requires some sense of power against power and all the things that Burke celebrated in the United States as well as in England, that need to be retained. So totally get it. It opens up all those questions. You're totally right. You're totally right. But somebody who's not considering them, finish him. Would agree with is AOC, and I just can't miss the opportunity to roast her because she's in this like awkward place of trying to like defend the people against the same type of government that she herself is proposing so often in trying to lead the Democratic Party to the extreme left of the Green New Deal and like massive amounts of program. And she is so quick to criticize the United States and its traditions and its heritage and inheritance, all these things. And now she's in this place where, hey, the reason that people don't like what you're proposing in so many conservative places is because it's the same socialist word and to some degree inherent policies that has made Cuba what it is today, as well as Venezuela and so many examples that she just doesn't want to talk about. So that's my roast of her. But hey, that's easy to do, and they do that on so many conservative channels. But what I want to do tonight with you, Josh, to make the most use of your time, and to go take it a step deeper, is to talk about kind of conservatism on a more practical level. Because we talked about this last week, and we've done it so many times. There's so many conservative pundits. I mean, just turn on Fox News or whatever, listen to Ben Shapiro. He's got like a whole show on debunking liberal lies or leftist lies or whatever. And it's easy to criticize, but it's harder to actually propose, what is the solution? What is the answer? Kind of what you were alluding to. What is the way to do a revolution, right? And what does conservatism honestly look like beyond just, owning the libs and that type of thing? And that's what I want to kind of do tonight. So I got some material. I'm looking forward to your honest reactions about this, because where I want to take this is, you and I in the past have talked about conservatism from an intellectual standpoint, the ideas, some of the philosophies, the books, obviously, that have been written by conservatives. But I want to bring that down to a much more practical level. And that's why this section is called Conservatism as Management. First time that I've ever really talked about any of these things with anybody, but I'm grateful for your involvement in this. And I guess my first question for you, and this I am thinking about from a theoretical standpoint, but would you say that generally speaking, most people that you've interacted with and known, would you say that people are afraid of change? Feel free to flesh that out if you like, because there's lots of ways to answer.
Yeah,
Think so?
I certainly know some that I think it would be appropriate to say afraid of change. I would say there are others that maybe a better way to describe it is uncomfortable with change.
Mm.
I think who is the psychologist? I'm blanking on his name. Jonathan Haidt. There we go. Wrote
Oh, one of my
the
favorites.
Righteous
Yeah, he was
Mind.
a professor at the University of Virginia when I was there. He was absolutely one of my favorites. But go for it. Yeah. What about him?
Yeah, an incredible thinker, and I think he has a very salient message. But he often talks about these moral taste buds we have, and how sometimes that predisposes us to have a conservative or progressive mindset, One of them he identifies is the willingness or the desire to change,
Mm,
to experience new things. Kind of this openness tends to lend itself more towards a progressive mindset, whereas a conservative mindset is, and again, I don't know that afraid is necessarily the right way to put it, more of a wariness or a discomfort with change.
mm. So I want you to consider, and I'm very aware of Jonathan Haidt, and it just amazing. I forget where I know he switched a couple universities since he was at UVA, but I respect him immensely. But thinking about this in a slightly different way, I want you to consider the notion that it might not be the change that people are afraid of. Because um, if I were to give you, right, a library, right, Beauty and the Beast style, of the greatest conservative works in history in mint copies, that would probably be a good thing. Or I was thinking about things that you like, um, if I was to renovate your pool so that you could jump in when it's cold and enjoy those freezing temperatures that you like so much, right? For me, if someone came along and they gave me tickets to the Super Bowl, that's good change, right? Like if we were to hand somebody on the street, hey, this is a winning lottery ticket, no joke. Here you go, enjoy your life, like have a great one, or a new car. People like that change, right? They like change when they know it's a good thing. They know when it's an improvement. People are all about some change, right? That's going to help them. Um, it's loss. It's loss that people are afraid of, right? People are afraid that change could also bring loss. If change is going to bring nothing but
Hmm.
improvement, then it's a great thing. But change so often can be associated with, well, what's changing? Is it something that is near and vital and precious to me? And if that is going to be lost, then I don't want none of that change, right? And I think that's why on the left they use the word change so much, is because there's less attachment to so many things in the past for many liberals, right? There's an openness there. Whereas conservatives, a lot of times we talk a lot about how much we love the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and the freedom that was fought for and the flag, the things that we don't want to lose, right? So just something to consider there. But if that's the case, then how do we start to sort through this in a more complex fashion? So this is kind of my proposal that I'm going to go through, and this is what I want to hear your reactions to. Is what if we think about the things that change, or the way that we approach change, is in life in general, with three fundamental questions, which is one, what is vital? Two, what can be lost? And three, where can innovation occur? Right? And it's trying to sort out kind of what I was just saying there, is these different issues involved in these things. And the easiest way I think is to think about, let's start about at the smallest level. It's like I was thinking about myself, right? Like I try to run and try to engage in fitness stuff, and sometimes I'm good, for a while on it, but then I'll take like a few days off or even a couple of weeks off and then get back to it. And think about your body, right? Kind of going platonic here for a minute. Like if you think about starting at the lowest level of just the individual person, I mean, there's so much that's vital about this white line here would probably go up to like 90 or 95% of a human being is vital. All of our organs and our skin and our blood, and right, like the water that's in our bodies, so much is vital. But there are some things that we can afford to lose. Change that helps me lose weight is really good change. I'm excited about that, especially if I don't have to work too hard at it. I could also do a little bit more muscle, like I can lift some weights and I can make something. So when someone says, "Hey, how do you approach, right, your fitness or your physical life?" Maybe this is a way, right? And so I could give you some other examples here, which will go quickly because you can easily build this up. What if you're running a restaurant? Like I've worked in restaurants for many years when I was a kid in high school and then in college. Your popular entrees, if you're coming into a restaurant and say, hey, how are we going to run this restaurant? Let's do this in a conservative fashion. Well, we need to protect what is vital, don't we? And that's what conservatives do. So those popular entrees that everybody loves, let's hold on to the ones that, were here from the beginning of the restaurant and the original owner invented, whatever, right? Like they're amazing. But then those low selling ones that nobody likes or understands, or, hey, this was really, it's just not selling. It's sitting in the back. Maybe that can be lost. And maybe there's the potential to update them or change them into new entrees. And you could carry this through. I even thought about governments, right? You're talking about, we've talked about Cuba. You could talk about the government of the United States. I mean, there's so much that, needs to be held on to that we talk about as conservatives, but then there's all these inefficiencies and overreach and things like that, that are problems that can be lost that we criticize. Um, and but even in the midst of that, there's chance for progress. There's things that we can do differently. There's services that we could provide. We can apply some of those constitutional responsibilities. So that's really kind of where I'm at in terms of, is that conservatives are more, generally speaking, on this white end of the spectrum of what is vital, right, or gray, whatever, right? They would constantly think about that, of holding on to what is vital. And I see so many progressives on the other end where they're constantly talking about what can be better. Because you take somebody who, right, has heard nothing but America's sins and atrocities from the past, they don't see much as vital about that, right? If that's all that you see with the flag, then you see not just where can innovation occur, but a lot of things that could be lost. Let's get rid of that racism. How about that, right? But as a conservative, if you're constantly saying, well, no, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what is vital in my life and in my country and the things that I don't want to see. So anyway, we can get into it even more, but I want to pause and kind of get your reactions and see, what you think of that so far.
I think it's an interesting paradigm the way you've laid it out. I think it is true that conservatives are just by virtue of being conservatives are concerned about what is vital rather than where can innovation occur.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll leave it with that. I have maybe some other thoughts, but we'll flesh those out as we go along.
Yeah, yeah. Because so my thoughts on this is, so many times as conservatives, we think about the philosophy of conservatism. We think about voting, for people, and I tend to see like two ends of the spectrum, right? There are conservatives who are just like the Charlie Kirk school of conservative, which is just stop arguing, vote Republican. Like it doesn't matter if it's Trump or Bush or Romney or whatever. It's better than those evil liberals. So just, shut up and vote. And then we'll talk about, the surface level of these things and occasionally go into more depth, but really just to smear them and get back to what matters, the election. And then there's the intellectual, schools of conservatism where we're thinking about kind of the more esoteric, belief systems and all those things. And my theory is what we're missing is where people actually live, right? Because people don't spend a lot of time voting, Josh. Like they just, I mean, this, right? Like it's a small part of your life, honestly. Some people, a lot of people don't vote, and then there's an enormous. I mean, you could look at studies for specific areas, but I'm thinking of where I live. A midterm election, I mean, come on, like turnout is almost always down. And then you get, even when you talk about a big election like Trump versus Biden, there's still 20-25% of registered voters, which is not obviously, the entire population. So this whole political decision is a really small, and then of course, you're not even talking about primaries and the actual like run up to this stuff. So this is a very small part of people's lives. It may affect a lot, but it's a small part. And then even less, I would say, is the philosophical side. A lot of people are just getting by. And until we bring conservatism to this level where it's part of your daily life, and that's kind of my proposal to you, is how do we bring conservatism to a place where, this is something that I can use. This is something I can use in my business, whether, like I said, it's waiting tables or with my family, or with my physical routine, of actually bringing this down to a mindset where when we say, hey, I'm a conservative. Oh, okay, so you vote Republican? No. Oh, okay, so you read books about Barack? Well, yeah, but like that's just a small part of it. It's actually like ingrained in who I am, and that doesn't mean that I'm against innovation or against making any changes to my life. And I love that, because I guess that's what speaks to me is getting through this material is so much of it brings me back into Burke and his thoughts about a conservative being a reformer by trade, being someone who preserves what is vital and also is open to change, as he was. So
I'm, the thought that pops into my head is sort of the localism or the communities that we as individuals inhabit when you apply this sort of thinking, right?
yeah,
So there's, what do I have in my life that has immense value that I'm very grateful for? Well, maybe the most obvious, my family, say. there are parts of that that just through no one's fault, some people have passed on. And those, those old Christmases we used together with my great great aunts up in Owasso, about half an hour's drive from here. They were the matriarchs of the family, always got people together. They're gone. They're not with us anymore. And years before they passed on, they were kind of not in a condition where they could do that. So there has to be a certain innovation for these family, I won't even call them traditions, but for the experience to continue while still holding on to the tradition. Obviously, we can go too far one way or another, right? If we are never open to change, when the dear old Aunt Helen passes away, there will be no more family gatherings. But if we're
Right.
completely changed, then
Right.
we're never going to go to Aunt Helen's gathering.
Right. Right. Because this change is again part of life. It's how you approach it. I think that matters. And yeah, so I mean that's exactly it. Is being able to approach really tough decisions like that, and how you frame and think about. Because there are people who say, well, everything about the past is vital, and again on a local or a practical level, that's really what I'm talking about. But I mean, it does work for the politics too. Is because I mean you have kind of Trump who really ran on a lot of nostalgia and kind of got people excited. Make America Great Again. He was talking about the past. He was trying to turn the clock back in so many ways. We're going to bring coal jobs back, and we're going to bring manufacturing back, and we're going to bring all these things back, right? And people see so much of that as looking at the back. And but what do they mean? They're only looking at what's vital. Do we really need to bring back a society where you have like cigarettes in every restaurant, right? And kids are being brought in. Oh, there's a non-smoking section, and they're just getting it secondhand. It's fine, right? Like there's so many things about the way life used to be that is part of that can be lost, y'all. That we don't need to bring that back, right? And that's kind of implicit to a lot of Trump supporters and right wingers, but it wasn't so obvious to people on the left, right? When they see these rallies and things like that, where it looks a lot like America used to be, and for them, that is not happy memories. That is their parents telling them about the civil rights movement and slavery. Their parents before them and grandparents before them telling them about slavery and how much how awful it was. And they hear turn the clock back. That sounds like a whole lot of things in that middle column where we lost some things that we didn't need, like lynchings and horrible, horrible things like that. And so I think it can still, even the political debates, it can inform that too. So it's kind of both sides. There's a practical philosophy for your life, and at the same time, a way to have conversations about conservatism in a much more specific fashion. And that's kind of where I'm on. So, yeah. No, so I wanted to.
I do think in terms of, it's interesting you mentioned that in terms of the, say, Make America Great Again mindset. I understand the idea there. Obviously, hollowing out of certain communities. Uh, Great incentive to support that kind of mindset. Understandable, laudable even. I think sometimes my concern is, while the role for, say, the federal government to play in trying to understand and recognize maybe, okay, have our trade deals contributed to these problems? Have certain fiscal or federal policies caused the hollowing out of the United States? Unfortunately, these communities cannot be restored just through federal means alone.
Right.
Like once these, if my family is, if my entire family suddenly dies, there's nothing the federal government can do about that.
Right.
Now, there may be some policies the government, enacts that cause my family to be perpetually stuck in poverty, say, and maybe there are things we could do about that. But the reality is, if the Fed suddenly ended those programs or whatever it is that's causing the poverty cycle, it's still incumbent upon me and everybody else to do the really hard work that takes years and years,
Right.
To accrue. So I guess I'm saying I understand the mindset, and I think it's a good mindset. I just don't know that that's how we for these things.
Right. Yeah, you're kind of talking about that blue column too, but I've kind of seen both sides of it. Right? I remember reading papers from the EPA, right, Environmental Protection Agency, and it was from professors and academics and intellectuals, and then of course like people working within the administration. They're always very proud of themselves because they were like, hey, we've come up with this way to be able to create jobs that are now green where they didn't used to be, and this is going to be awesome because it's going to make the company more money. But then what would happen is there's a training period, right? A long one for a lot of these steep learning curves to be able to use this, be able to program this automated, this, that, and the other so that it'll do the job. And then the skill set is not, what it used to be. So, if you can, you get into some of these industries and it's like, hey, we need computer workers. We need less people on the line because all that's been automated now. We need more programmers. We don't need more people who know how to do spreadsheets and PowerPoint, all this stuff, and less people who work with their hands, right? And they were like, well, in the EPA reports and everything that I was reading, they're like, well, we're creating all these jobs. This is great. But are those jobs going to go to the same people who are 40 and 50 years old that have been working their whole lives in this industry? Or are they going to go to people straight out of college, right? Who they can get a whole lot more out
Hmm.
of, who are eager and excited about learning something new versus someone who's been doing it the same way for 10 or 15 years, right? And so they were all focused on this whole like blue column of innovation and we can do all these things and it's great. And it's like, but for a lot of people, you're running over what has been vital to them, what has been their livelihood, right? They've gotten very, very good at this old way of doing things. And so, I think Trump played on that. I think in many ways, he made everything seem like it was white, or gray here. Everything was vital, right? I'm going to bring all that back, which isn't really realistic. But again, we're talking past each other. We're overstating, the notion of change to the point that it gets associated with only one end of this spectrum, right? And that's where you see Burke in between saying, hey, it's okay. We can change. We can allow America to have some of its own decision making. That's okay. We can allow that. We can stop being such a colonizer. That's okay without losing our tradition and what's vital about, our history. And I wish this was part of our conversation. I wish we had the leading conservative, you know, thinkers and speakers and pundits, Fox News talking about this, and how to adapt it versus just kind of crapping on whichever liberal happened to say something silly that day. Because I think it would help us. I think it would help us say, hey, so when I approach a liberal and they're talking to me about, hey, we need to change this, we need to change that, we need to build this program, I'm like, okay, you're talking about innovation, right? You're talking about that. Can I bring to mind what is vital? Can I bring to mind what is being lost versus what probably should be lost? And can you think about those things too? And then the same thing when I talk to someone who's a conservative, and not necessarily someone who's read all the stuff that we've talked about, but they're talking about, hey, the world's just going to crap, and I'm just tired of everything's done. Like, do you feel like everything that is, being lost is vital? Or maybe there's a few things that we could do without, so maybe some good things have happened. Maybe there is some opportunities for innovation. Also, some things about American history that, I really don't mind that a couple of the statues came down in Charlottesville. We really didn't need them. Were they vital? Not really, Josh. Not really. Now they start like dismantling the school or completely undoing all the history down there, right? That's kind of a problem for me. But sorting out, hey, the Lincoln statue, keep that one. That's vital to who we are as a people. But we could do with a few less of the other ones, right? So that kind of thing, as opposed to again slamming, shaming the other side, and washing their arguments in one spectrum or the other, one end of the spectrum or the other. So that's the thought, man. I hope that helps. I know that much like me, you're doing this thing of trying to be out there and speak truth to people and get them in conversation with conservatism. And I wanted to throw that at you to kind of get your reaction. So I appreciate it, man. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And I am generally supportive of anything that helps us to stop talking past each other. I'm
Yes.
a conservative. I'm pretty partisan. I have some strong opinions, but I also want us to live in a world in which we can have those debates in a civil manner.
Yeah. 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 And I think that's where you got to give space for someone's intentions to be something different than maybe what most would say or assume, right? So and that's the point. So, well, hey, thank you so much for being on the show. Really appreciate it. Josh Lewis from Saving Elephants podcast. Always a pleasure. Looking forward to having John back and hopefully Cal Davenport in the future as well. If you've got questions for us on the show, if there's other topics you want us to get into, let us know. Don't forget to check out his website at savingelephants.com, as well as, so he's got podcasts with all kinds of different amazing speakers on there. And then as well with our show on the BreakingConservative.com, you've got our other show, Refounding Fathers. Take a look at that. Let us know. We'll be happy to bring on different folks. I've gotten a couple recommendations this week of different folks that you guys want me to reach out to, so I will get on that as soon as possible. But in the meantime, really appreciate having you again, Josh, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thanks, buddy.